and you slide around the road. So didn't do that.
At least it's more interesting. We do have the leaves changing here. Hi, Jason. Welcome. Hi, Marla. Hi, Tracy.
Hello.
Hi, David. If you'd like, you can say your name, where you're from. You can put it into the chat.
Hello, this is Marla from Atlanta.
Hi, Marla. Welcome. You're not too far from Mab compared to where I am.
Right.
Okay,
Got a lot of friends in Atlanta.
great.
Hey everyone, I'm in Washington, D.C. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome, Jason. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Jill. Good to see you.
Likewise.
Yeah, good to see a few people here.
Mab, I don't know if you know, but Lynn has a site called crossculturalsolidarity.com where he's compiling a history of white anti-racists, and you're there.
Oh,
And that's
yeah,
where I got
yeah,
the picture of
Hey,
young
thank
you.
very much. Yeah. I appreciated that. I'm in very good company on that site. I was a little embarrassed or something, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, Mab, yours was one of the first that I wrote there, and I actually need to go back and revise it because the more I did, the longer they got. And so yours is actually a little too
Concise.
It's a little too concise. Yeah.
No, I appreciated it. I haven't had a chance yet, but I'll show it to my daughter. There's certain times where she questions my politics. So I thought that would be a resource to just tell her maybe it wasn't as bad as she thought it was.
Really interesting. Well, I'm going to give it another minute or two because we have about half the people here who actually registered. Our tech person is going to be joining later, David. So I'm going to try to solve any tech problems. I hope there won't be any. How's the weather where everybody is? Good.
It's a little cloudy here in the Bay Area, but I guess, Jill, what do you think? Are you feeling the same way this morning?
Yeah, I mean, there actually was a tsunami warning for Berkeley. I was telling Mab, I talked to her a day or two ago, and David, who's the research geek of the two of us, did some research and found out that like tsunamis in the Bay Area are not a thing because of the only thing we ever have to be afraid of is this certain area in Alaska. So even if we did have a tsunami, unless we were living in a houseboat on the bay, we probably wouldn't be too impacted. So that helped me sleep better. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started, and then people can trickle in as things happen. I've got closed captioning on by request of someone who I don't know if is here. So if you, I'll ask this again later, but if you're finding the closed captioning, first of all, can everybody see the words at the bottom? That are popping up? So what this means is that this is being recorded, and once it's recorded during the time of this event and after it's recorded, somebody who has any kind of hearing impairment will be able to tell what's going on. So I'm thinking out loud here. My inclination is let's leave it on, even if there is nobody right here right now who's benefiting from it, because you never know who might want to listen / watch this and benefit from having the closed captioning. So I'll go ahead and leave it on. Mab, I have a long introduction for you, so bear with me.
Okay.
So this, I cobbled together from your books and Wikipedia and different places, so you probably recognize some of the sentences. The arc of Mab Segrest's work spans 40 years and profound cultural shifts, the resolution of which still hangs in the balance. She is the author of 5 well-known books, including the one we'll be discussing today, whose 25th anniversary edition came out in 2019, Memoir of a Race Traitor, Fighting Racism in the American South. In 2020, her work of scholarship over 10 years was published, and that's called Administrations of Lunacy, Racism and the Haunting of American Psychiatry. Is it Milledgeville? Is that how you pronounce that?
Yep.
at the Milledgeville Asylum, which is a scathing and original look at the racist origins of psychiatry through the story of the largest mental institution in the world. I get chills just reading that. And in it, she shows how the Milledgeville Asylum helped set the stage for the eugenics theories of the 20th century and the racial mythologies that persist today. In 2002, she published Born to Belonging, Writings on Spirit and Justice, and also in 2002, Sing, Whisper, Shout, Pray, Feminist Visions for a Just World. And before that, in 1985, My Mama's Dead Squirrel, Lesbian Essays on Southern Culture. You know, Mab, there are other works of yours too, which to me are also quite interesting. And I'm not going to read them all here, but just a couple. Was a 1991 work called Quarantines and Death, the Far Right's Homophobic Agenda. And you've also contributed to a number of periodicals and anthologies over the years, including All Out of Faith, Southern Women on Spirituality, and The Question of Equality, Lesbian and Gay Politics in America Since Stonewall. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because unlike other prolific writers, Mab Segrest doesn't just write. She is relentless. This word came up. Wow, you are relentless in her actions as well as her words. From 19... No, so I'll just rewind a little bit. Unlike other prolific writers, Mab Segrest doesn't just write. She is relentless in her actions as well as her words. From 1983 to 1990, you worked with North Carolinians against racist and religious violence, for which work you were credited by many for driving the Ku Klux Klan out of North Carolina. What a badass. Oh my God.
That's wrong. That's wrong.
Okay, well, I'm sure that other people were involved too, but I mean, just to have that attached to you, wow. And as of 4 years ago, you're back in North Carolina now in your 70s for another round. So let's look at this full circle, and what is that like for you, and how did you get here? And wow.
I got here by keeping on living until I'm 73. So the resume gets longer and the circles go around again, and get to come back to certain issues that you might have done in one's youth or middle age and take another shot at them, given the repetitive nature of white supremacy in this culture. And right now I'm back home to North Carolina, where I came in 1972 to go to graduate school at Duke, got a PhD in English that I never really used, and then went north to Connecticut, taught at Connecticut College from 2002 to 2014, spent some time in Brooklyn, and then about 4 years ago, felt like North Carolina's home, and it's time I went home, because there's work to do here that I understand, that I didn't understand the same way from Brooklyn or from New London. So here I am.
Can you say more about that? There's work to do here that you didn't understand in the same way from another time in another place. Can you give some examples of that?
Yes. Well, like Memoir of a Race Traitor, if you've read it, really for the core of it, which is the organizing campaigns we did in North Carolina that I was involved in from 83 to 90, to try to break the back of what was then the most virulent Klan and Nazi organizations in the country. So I traveled all over the state, really got an initiation into North Carolina that I think a lot of Duke graduate students don't get. Little towns, counties, really front, back, and sideways. So I knew North Carolina, and I still do. I mean, that memory still holds and context still hold. Whereas in New York, it was so disorienting for me to be on the subway and to pass these stations, and I had no idea what it looked like West 4th Street, and then once you get to West 4th Street, which is south, which direction? And it took me a while in Lower Manhattan and parts of Park Slope to kind of get that sorted through. But I always had the sense of where am I? And New Yorkers come either, in their youths when I went to Durham, or been there their lives or a couple generations or something, they kind of integrated all of that. So, and I did some organizing with Showing Up for Racial Justice, a surge in New York, in the early Trump era. It was very powerful, and I really appreciated working mostly with young people on that and getting to know some of the organizing terrain. But I was just always very aware that there were so many things I didn't know, that when I came back here, I came back in 4 years ago, forget the date, for a gig at the National Humanities Center, which is out near Durham, and it's a wonderful place. I finished up most of the research for administrations of lunacy there, but I knew after a couple of weeks that I didn't want to go, like this was home, like I wanted to stay. And there's this road in Durham called Cornwallis Road, and it breaks off, and you go here and you go here. And I was taking it to get out to Humanities Center. And there was just something very compelling about all these segments. It's like somebody chopped up a snake, had a hoe and chopped up a snake. And just trying to remember Cornwallis Road and remembering what I remember, all of those things, but also having friends who just welcomed me back. I mean, I had been coming back and forth because my family stayed here, and I spent summers and all when I was working at Connecticut College, which I did in the first decade and into the half of the second of the 21st century.
Now, can I jump in for a second? There's
Yeah.
something you touched on that I really want to foreground,
Right.
especially given some of your other work around the spirituality. That is a sense of place
Mhm.
and a relationship to the literal earth and ground that you were familiar with, and the trees and the smells and everything. And in New York, so many people are displaced, and it's a place of displacement, if you will, in some ways. And so I wonder if you could, and I had the sense, I don't know if this is true or not, so I wanted to check it out with you, that as you're coming back to this place, that not just the people, but also the land and the snaky chopped up roads and that sort of thing. I wonder if that also gives you a sense of power, of belonging, of ability to do what you want to do in this world.
Yeah. I mean, I know how to move, and I know who to move with. I mean, I didn't experience New York as essentially displacing. My partner then was a wonderful person who had been in New York, was grown up in New York, and had her daughter there and grandchildren there. And I watched Emmett, who was her grandson, really come alive in the city. I mean, and learn about fire engines, which he called Faginese, love the G train, and go to the parks. And so I could really see him growing in his terrain. In a way, it wasn't my terrain, so, and he was very attached to it, as was his family. But I just realized, like, it's not my terrain as much as I loved and appreciated my friends in New York and what I'd done in New York. And when you're 70, you don't have a couple more decades to kind of sort it through. Oh, well, I'll see what I am at 80. It's just like, I do not want to be carried out either on a stretcher or a coffin, like I need to go home and do things from there. And I did find once I got here, as a friend of mine said, we kept your seat warm for you. I mean, I really could start working almost immediately in Southerners on New Ground, on abolition work, and now on tracking the right in North Carolina, which is an old skill set of mine that is, in a discouraging way, very contemporary. So,
wow. Well, let me just stop there for a moment. Speaking of welcoming, I wanted to welcome in Naomi, Raquel, and Karen, who just joined both of you just joined, to say hello and thank you for being here. Is there anybody else who joined that I missed welcoming? Okay, thank you. So you were saying this, you're going back to the skill set that you have of
yeah.
Was it write-in that you just,
Pardon?
what was it that you named to do with voting?
Oh, tracking down the right wing, tracking down Nazis, Nazi hunting.
Wow. I think a lot of us, at least in the Bay Area here, I'll speak for myself, a lot of my work has been more conceptual and working with people's mindsets and working, kind of digitally online. And you have such a long history of really implicating your body in not theoretical white supremacy, but actual physically expressed murderous, harmful white supremacy. And there's a place in the book where you contrasted literally what you were just one example of that with with what was going on here on the West Coast when he came to visit. I'd like to read that passage, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So there's a section where you're driving Eddie Hatcher, who supposedly had evidence to implicate the Robeson County Sheriff's Office and the DA in drug trafficking. You've got him in your car, and you're going to the Christic Institute in Carborough, where you're going to get some help to take this further. And
Hopefully,
correct me,
yeah.
you're hoping to get some help to take this further. And while you're in the car, you're fighting off images of the mysterious car accident that killed Karen Silkwood while she was delivering evidence that the Kerr-McGee Corporation had knowingly contaminated its nuclear power plant workers. So, because that's really kind of a parallel situation. And then the next thing you know, Eddie and his friends have taken hostages at the local paper to get the story out, and you're fighting off images of the potential shootout that could ensue and yet more deaths. You know, I'm just like, in my mind, I'm contrasting this. Well, somebody posted a nasty meme. And then cut to visiting the San Francisco Bay Area. We're going to talk to your friend Ruth Frankenberg's class on women and racism. And no wonder you got sick to your stomach and needed a few days to recover. The contrast of theirs is so striking to me, reminds me of how far removed I am from those actual physical threats. So I thank you for all of that. I am so glad that you're alive.
Yeah, me too.
And I wonder if you can say anything about self-care during this work and your friend Christos's injunction to you to have fun.
Right. I do a little better with that these days. But I want to go back first, though, to the how we know things. And I have a PhD. I've been a full professor. I've taught at a university. But I have a much more hybrid orientation and CV than many people. Like when I was at Connecticut College, I was somewhat of an anomaly because people had come up through graduate school and assistant professor, associate, full, hopefully, if you get that far, So I was kind of coming in sideways, and I was delighted to have a little department that I could kind of shape that way. But I've always believed I'm deeply a teacher. I'm probably a teacher more than anything else. And I really love Paulo Freire in his sense of praxis, which is a kind of melding of action and reflection. He talks about cycles of action and reflection, characteristic of all human emergence. So at the time I started doing the work in INCARV across the state in that way, I had just finished up my dissertation, and I saw other professors at Duke who would go off to Paris or go off to Lisbon or go down, wherever for the summer. And I had gone to Pittsburgh or, out east or something like that. But I felt like I was learning so much, crossing class and race lines and what these movements were like, just this visceral and emotional and spiritual sense, really, of in the world, and learning with, and especially from Black and brown working class people. That was my education. And that really was what animated me, as well as coming out as a lesbian, to do the writing I've done, because the work I was doing as academic was just as boring as hell. My friend Minnie Bruce Pratt at one point said to me, "Mab, that is so boring. You can never write like that again."
What was she referring to?
An essay I wrote in My Mama's Dead Squirrel on Southern women writing toward a literature of wholeness, attempt to situate Southern writing, which has had a fairly conservative cast to the literary theory, within a feminist anti-racist context. And it started off, though, writing like it was a piece of literary criticism for a very boring professor in a very boring department, and so I threw it out, and I started off much more personally about how I was struggling with material, and then I started what has become a kind of characteristic of my writing, a kind of mixed genre of memoir and analysis, going back and forth between them.
I love that.
Myself, yeah. So, I forgot your second question, but that
it was about self-care, but that also makes me wonder. So Minnie Bruce Pratt thought your writing was too academic and boring. You made it more personal. But then I'm wondering, how do you not, how, if at all, or did you do that with the Milledgeville book? I would imagine that you couldn't as much.
Right. Yeah. Well, in terms of self-care, I'll just go back to that concept. Memoir of a Race Traitor came at a point where I had pulled back from the work because I had started getting sick. But part of my self-care was understanding what had happened. Like I had internalized these forces. I kind of overworked myself on the road, and but I'd internalized these forces and I needed to externalize them. So I set about writing the book as a way to do that, and pulled back to give myself more time for that reflection. I would go to the beach. I love to go to the beach for a month. That's my favorite form of self-care. And just walk with the tides, which means you walk an hour a little later every day, walk an hour and a half or so, come back, meditate, and then, write in the morning, walk the tides, read in the afternoon, take a little nap, have great seafood in the evening. If there's friends there, you chat, look at the stars, and you start the next day. And
Oh my God, that sounds beautiful.
yeah, the
Ah,
ocean's taken a lot of care of me, and North Carolina has beautiful oceans. So that way, refocusing more on family. My daughter was born in '86, and children are always another ecosystem, and things like that. When I was at Connecticut College for the first time, I had sabbatical, so I could take a year off, which was just a remarkable thing, because most of my work is very much, the other thing about the praxis, though, it's been very much, the things I've written have very much been tied to the work that I did. For Race Traitor, I was working for INCARV, and I was doing the reports for it. So I had a whole body that I could build on to do the organizing thread of the book, which is one of them. And when I did Born to Belonging, I was working with the World Council of Churches. We traveled a lot, and as an attempt to understand questions of spirituality and political organizing on kind of a cusp of globalization. So for the first time, being a professor, which was miraculous, with a
wait, why do you say it was miraculous?
Well, I wandered away from academics a good bit, because in the 1980s, for lesbians coming out, it was kind of publish and perish. I saw many friends older than me and doing wonderful work get really humiliated in tenure processes by male academics, basically white male academics, in those processes, So I also knew that the work that we were doing as lesbians and feminists, as anti-racists and socialists, all those things coming off the Combahee River Collective, which we can talk about, Black Feminist Manifesto, doing all those things was really enlivening. And that work was too important to do inside the academy, because the academy is very conservative in the tenuring process. So it needed to happen adjacent to it. So it was somewhat miraculous to me. And I was very grateful to Connecticut College that they hired me as an adjunct interim for 2 years. But I submitted for the regular position and was given it. And then I was tenured, and then I was promoted to full professor. So kaboom, all of a sudden in 2 years, it was as if I had done all that other stuff too. And so that was miraculous for me, that both Connecticut's different than some places I had been. And I really appreciate the college. Jackie Alexander, brilliant woman, had been the chair of the department before me. So she had really created a different context there too. So
You were the chair of the department. How did that feel to you? I mean, that's a little bit different from being in North Carolina chasing down Klan members.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You had to chase down, you have to chase down a different set of people in academics. I won't go into it unless somebody wants to ask me about it. But you're still being chased, and you're still chasing down people. But I had a great salary, the kind of job security you have in tenure. I mean, you practically have to commit a felony and get kicked out. And I loved having a department until I figured out I was the only person in it. And then I began to see the limits of that. I mean, women's studies programs are very small. I mean, if you go from a program to a department, and then you're the person, the full-time employee in that, academics will know what I'm talking about, then you have a program, you're having to both build a department and keep the program going and bring in more people to have an actual department. And I realized after a while that was a lot when I looked around and compared it to what other people in different departments were doing. But I always loved the teaching. I still love the students I had there. We're in touch over over Facebook and the internets, and that was a wonderful experience.
How long were you there?
From 2002 to 2014, 12 years.
Wow. Okay. So
And it
that's
was great because I got to teach my students as freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. There were 4 core classes, and I taught 3 out of 4 of them. So I could really see them go up the escalator and know where each one of them was and know where we wanted to be at the end of it. And I really loved that. And we taught like transnational feminism, race, class, gender, sexuality, but we talked about power. We talked about all these structures and things. I was trying to teach them to read structures and see where they are in them because
Yeah.
they change so rapidly, you know. And I, you know, like I never, they really loved it, you know, like they love to be able to talk about power and have the language for it and have conversations across differences in a classroom. And because I was talking about power in systems, the working class and poor students and students of color, many of times they sat either all in the back or all in front. You know, they had a leg up on the white privileged students who hadn't had to think about those things. They just rode the currents of them, you know. So it changed the dynamics in the classroom enough that everybody had something to learn, and they learned a lot from each other. And I love to do that. So I had a good time there.
sounds like it was really enriching both for you and
Yeah.
for the students. Yeah. And
That's
that you're still in
really
touch with them. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to return to you mentioned something about communities of faith or religion earlier. I don't remember what it was, but one of the things that struck me in the book as such a poignant moment was when you were in the Methodist Church and you noticed white people closing the doors to keep the Black people out, and you had this moment of, wait a second, aren't we saying knock and the door shall be open, you know, all can come to me, and that there's this, you really saw this contradiction, and that was a pivotal moment for you. And I wanted to tie that to then, you know, cut to KKK members literally burning crosses on lawns, and how Christianity gets used in the service of hatred. And I've had this notion, it might be completely naive, but I have this notion that because, you know, Christianity contains so many messages of liberation, and we actually have, you know, progressive Christian sects, we have Catholic social teaching that's quite liberal, quite class and poverty conscious. Do you think that there's, I mean, I know you've been doing work in this area, maybe you can say more about it, but do you think that there's any hope, or do you think that there is territory to be leveraged, if you will, within Christianity to help combat racism, white supremacy?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I can back up and verify that statement, but for Memoir of a Race Traitor, the new copy I've had right here, that's me when I was 30, half a life. Yeah, it's a very cute picture. I wouldn't have had a picture on it, but anyway, there's different components to it. I came out in 1979, very, very liberating for me, having grown up in Alabama, apartheid, terrified to even know who I was, and then all of a sudden have a very rich community of lesbian and feminist, anti-racist activists to join. Really one of the pivotal moments of my life. And then very soon could go back and look at the politics of my childhood, which I really didn't have the language for my own entry into, but I kind of imprinted on Black freedom struggles because they were the only things around. So I was like a little duck at the end of a line of swans or something, you know, like, let me figure out why, like these people are challenging these things. And I'm learning so much about the violence in my own culture and looking around and thinking, holy moly. I don't know if you allow cussing on your program, but just wasn't that, but just, you know, just.
Hell yes.
Okay, right. So, you know, so, but it took me a long time to get far enough to North Carolina and out enough to be able to name myself too. And then immediately after I did that, I was able to start various forms of anti-Klan organizing, and I was doing very progressive work with the handful of us really from this area who were doing out queer work in progressive context, you know. So Race Traitor has not only the campaigns, we did in North Carolina in an attempt, because it was self-care, to understand and map that terrain. Like, this is not just a throwback, this is about the future too. They want a world in which only Aryans survive, which is pretty extreme. So, you know, like how to make people understand that. This was here again in a more intense culture. And then also to take writings I had done as soon as I came out, because it was very enlivening for me, about my family, to try to understand my place in them. Very conservative family. My mom was sick a lot, and I had a sense it came from the fact that she didn't live up to her commitments that she shared with me about her information about the racism and the culture that basically she got from the African-American women who worked for us in our homes. And at least one of whom was very frank about her anger, which my mother allowed. And in fact, Belle would say, Klan's going to march, you need to stop it. And Mom would try to do it, you know, but she and my father started a segregated private school when Tuskegee schools integrated.
Well, yeah, can I just go back to something you just said about your mom?
Mhm.
Did you say that, I'm not sure I understood, do you think that something about her physical illness came from the contradiction that she was living?
Right. That was my interpretation at the time. And I wrote about it, and that was part of the essays in My Mama's Dead Squirrel. And I did feel like My Mama's Dead Squirrel was dedicated to my mother for all she taught me and all she left for me to learn. And I did feel like she had handed me a lot of unresolved contradictions between her really anguish at the racism she saw, her desire, you know, her realization was going to come to a head, couldn't last forever, how she situated herself within it. And then the choice she had when she and my father were one of 4 people who started segregated private school, you know, which really shocked me that she would do that. It was not shocked my dad would do that at all, you know. So I always felt that for her, there had been this gap, and she had made the wrong choice, basically, kind of ethically. I wanted her to be different. She would have thought she was doing it for me. So I did feel like that there were spiritual issues involved in these choices we make, and they have repercussions. I'm not so sure that wasn't too much psychologizing of us. My dad said these things started a lot before then, you know, and I have felt that in retrospect, I used my mother a lot and as an example, and she wasn't alive for some of it, but I felt like I didn't have to put so much on her maybe, but at that point I did. And I really needed to separate myself from her because I could see her going down, and I wanted to be able to take the best of her, but not have to take the rest. And how you sort out that with family is a really big thing, you know. So a lot of My Mama's Dead Squirrel was trying to sort through my mother. A lot of Memoir of a Race Traitor was trying to sort through my father.
Beautiful. Did it work? You feel like the sense of,
Well, with my mother, she died 6 months after the book came out. And so when I started Race Traitor, I thought if I wrote about my father, I would become an orphan. It's like, okay, I took it, you know, I mean, anyway, you know what I'm talking about, but, and so the first drafts of Race Traitor really didn't have him in there, although the more I was writing about it, the more I knew I was writing about and to him. And my friend Dorothy Allison, wonderful Southern novelist, at reading one of the drafts said, "What are you doing, ma'am? Waiting for your dad to die?" And I thought, well, could be. So I had to go back and write him in, which I was already using this childhood stuff. And so I wrote him in. And then at the point where I had also sent the book to my mother, she was mortified, wanted to change a bunch of stuff, and it was too late to. I sent it to my father, talking about his racism and his organizing and his family, a bunch of stuff like that. And he called me back the next week and he said, "Mab, it's heartbreaking and you're too hard on yourself."
remember
Which I
that?
thought was beautiful, you know. And then later on, he said, you know, like, I have different memories in you of some of this stuff, but you have the right to your memories.
Beautiful.
And so after that, we got to really be friends. He became this weird kind of ambassador for the book. Like, I hadn't shown it to my brother or sister, so he called them up and he said I was going to sit. And
Well,
we
I
just got.
you know, even though your mother was expressing in her body all the illness, literally the dis-ease and the skin and so interesting, the skin trouble. I wonder if your father, at some part of him, was really also yearning for some kind of resolution himself, even as he was
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far, but both my mother and father were very good parents. When I sent my mama's dead squirrel, who is me, but it's a lot about her and about these relationships and trying to measure her against the love she said she had for Belle and Carrie, who were the Black women who lived in our house, and yet they were getting 50 cents an hour and etc. But when after she read it, she called me. When we talked, the first thing she said is, "Mab, do you know what forbearance means?" I said, "Well, Mama, I think it means you could throw me away and you've decided not to." And she said, I don't have a lot of, it was a little Tuskegee, a little town, and when you get to be 70 and 80, friends are really dropping, anyway. But she said, I don't have a lot of friends left in this town, and you have quoted me saying something ugly about every single one of them. And, and I said, Mom, I'm sorry, I guess I'll send you, if I make a bunch of money, I'll send you on a cruise. And she said, well, I'll have to go by myself because no one will go with me. So I felt like both my father and my mother gave me a lot of grace to be different than them, and not only be different than them. It's not only I'm the lesbian daughter who's doing this stuff, but I'm criticizing them deeply. But I think with love, I think it was because of the love for us, what I saw their role in the culture. And they allowed me to do it, and they didn't beat me up or disown me or whatever. I mean, my father was a very good friend, and my sister and brother were not always, and my father really stood up for me at the end. So I learned a lot and I gained a lot from trying to sort all that through. But I was also lucky, I think, in my parents.
It sounds like it, because gosh, and I had this image of you, with all of your ancestors behind you. Remind me which side the Cobb family was on. Was that your dad's or
My
your
mother's side?
Right. We watched the little video again last night of you visiting the graves. And I have this image, and I love how you talk about the history. Let's have everybody mute so we can not have the echo. And Julie, you're joined in two different places. I don't know if that's a problem. Anyway, so I had this image of you kind of at the end, or standing at, with this long line of Confederate racists behind you, and just going, basta, enough. The buck stops here. And just your powers, you were walking around these graves and telling the truth and picking up this Confederate flag. And if you can all go to mabsegrest.com, maybe you could put that in the chat, not to go there necessarily right now, but just watch this total badass and telling the truth.
Well, my friend Laura Flanders was kind enough to do a whole program on Race Traitor and then on the Asylum book. We had met a couple of years ago in New Orleans at Jazz Fest, and then drove back through Montgomery, got to talk to Brian Stevenson at the lynching and racial justice project. And then we went through Tuskegee for her to interview me there. And then we went to Milledgeville, and I was interviewed among the graves and the derelict hospital buildings. Lots of atmosphere, and that particular show goes pretty fast. It's 23 minutes, but I really was reluctant to go back to Tuskegee. So much of the white town is derelict and fallen down. And I just, the morning or the night before we were going to go, I just thought, and then I thought, well, where do you want to be interviewed? Like, where do you want to stand? And I immediately thought, my great grandfather's grave, Judge Cobb's grave. And and then I wanted to be on the steps of my church. And those two places were the places I wanted to speak from. And Laura, like she just was shooting it with her cell phone. She couldn't bring all of her camera equipment. And we're very good friends. I mean, go back a long way. So, I mean, I walked around this grave so many times. I said the same things over and over and over and over again, you know, so, but, you know, but I was basically saying, so why am I standing on this Confederate great-grandfather's grave rather than the one across the cemetery, the one out in the country? And it's, well, he was a racist son of a bitch. And then I told his story. So, and I said that a lot. I mean, I said that a lot in the process of it, but it was very cathartic. And they had put these little Confederate flags there. I'd come through a couple of days before and found them. It was just outraged, like, who gets to put this in our, you know, nobody asked me about it. But it was I could just wave it. It was a very good little example of the stuff that's still going on in cemeteries. So.
Wow. So, you know, I'm tempted to keep geeking out with you more and more about all this. So I want to give other people a chance to weigh in as well. And before we do that, I want to, oh my gosh, I had so many questions for you. I don't know how to handle paper anymore after so many years of digital. Look at all this.
Because I'm so old.
What does
I
that
have
have
a
to
lot of questions because I'm so old. I have a lot
No,
to
because I'm
account
so
for.
nosy.
The
So,
combination.
so your book is divided into two sections. One of them is sort of more strictly memoir, and the other one is these different histories of the United States interwoven with your own family history, which I think is amazing. And towards the end of the memoir section, you close with, there's a lot to be done, but how we go about it is also important because all we have ever had is each other. Love that. And so going into the breakout rooms, we're going to have, let's see, it's 9:42. Why don't we come back at 10:05 and you can, with your group, you can decide on a bio break in there if you want. So I'm going to give you an invitation. David, maybe you could type these in the chat. You can pick one of these questions or all of them or come up with your own. So my invitation to you is to divide up the time. We'll get into groups of 3 and take turns addressing what is alive in you. What is alive in you after hearing Mab speak about all that she spoke to? Another question is, what, if anything, are you inspired toward in your own life around anti-racism, anything related? And of course, any thoughts or questions for Mab. So, David, I didn't make you host. Does that mean that I need to put people in breakout rooms? You're nodding. Okay, let me do that. I'm going to make him host. Make host. David, welcome, by the way. David is my tech person. He's also the bouncer in case anybody is bothering you. And he's also my partner in life and crime. Welcome, Aaron. We're going into breakout rooms.
And are we doing, we're doing 2 people per breakout room?
Let's do 3 in case somebody doesn't want to be part of it, then at least somebody else will have one. And if you get into a breakout room and you wind up all by yourself, message David and he'll move you. Oh, bye, Marla. Thanks for coming. Hi, Julie. Good to see you. Nice beret. Is that a beret?
We're ready
Thank
to
you.
go into breakout rooms.
Okay.
And we'll see you guys in a little bit.